All right, let's talk about the Penguin. So we are in just a great time. We are in a great time because there are so many shows coming out right now. We have three major shows, one from Marvel, one from DC, and one from The Lord of the Rings. And it's just an awesome time. It's just an awesome time. I talked earlier about Agatha all along, and I really did enjoy those two episodes, but you can go check out if you're listening to the segment, you can go check out either the full podcast or the other segment about Agatha all along. Really enjoyed it though. But let's talk about the Penguin because look, it's been a while. It's been a while since I've seen the Batman, and it's been a while since I visited that universe. But I remember I saw the movie at least 2 or 3 times in theaters, and a couple more times after that. And it's a universe that it was endlessly fascinating to me. The way that Matt Reeves was able to ground his Batman universe in a way that was different and distinct from Christopher Nolan's. His universe almost felt more crime drama-esque, where, Nolan's Batman, I feel like, felt like today's world, like the real world, but in a Batman grounded kind of way. Matt Reeves' Batman feels like it's just part of this crime drama, which is really awesome. I think it's just such a cool thing that we get to have different iterations of Batman and different iterations of Gotham City all over the place. And I think that it truly is a testament to how different you can make these comic book movies and shows, and how you can create entirely different worlds in them as well. So we got Batman, and we were going to get the Batman Part 2. However, in between, because the Batman Part 2 is allegedly not coming out until 2026 or even probably 2026, but, hopefully not 2027. But in between, Matt Reeves was developing a little TV show called The Penguin. Now, for those of you who have seen The Batman, which I'm assuming is pretty much everyone here because this is a full spoiler discussion of The Penguin. For those of you who have seen The Batman, Penguin was a revelation because Colin Farrell is an Academy Award nominated. I don't believe he's won. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe he has won. Maybe he did win for Banshees of Inisherin. I don't remember. But he is an Academy Award nominated actor, and he's just phenomenal. And he sinks his teeth into pretty much every single role that he's ever given. And he's not afraid to do these kind of big blockbustery kind of roles. If you guys remember, he actually played the villain. I know it ended up being Johnny Depp in disguise, but for all intents and purposes in The Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, he was the main villain and Grindelwald in disguise. And he's definitely not beyond doing these kinds of things. In fact, I think he's really one of those actors who's so versatile and so game and willing and able to do anything in this space. So that's really awesome. And when we saw him as Penguin in the Batman, I mean, for me personally, it was just a revelation to see how he disappears into a role. Like, it is so incredible to see him in the makeup. It's so incredible to see him acting. And it was just a great thing. That being said, when they announced that they were doing a Penguin show, I was just excited to get back to the Batman universe. But if you were to ask me, make a spin-off show, my first choice would have been Arkham, which they have now since canceled, or something else, right? Something else that wasn't really focused on the Penguin. But then the first trailers came out, the first promos came out, and it was really exciting because it looked like this was going to be really, a superhero show in name only. And I don't mean that to disrespect the superhero genre. I just mean that it's not really focused on aliens coming down from the sky or whatever. It's just a crime story with Oz. I guess he's called Oz Cobb now. His name's Oswald still, but, they kind of changed it from Oswald Cobblepot to Oz Cobb, which is fine. Totally fine. It looked fantastic. The first reactions, the first reviews were amazing. And so I was actually quite excited to get into the first episode, which is airing on a Thursday. And then the subsequent episodes, it won't be the next Sunday, in 3 days, but it will be, 10 days after the first episode, and then it will be on Sundays from there on out. So really excited about that. Now, we are going to enter into a full spoiler discussion of episode 1. A lot to talk about. I guess maybe not as much plot-wise, but just lots to talk about, with this episode. So if you haven't seen the first episode of The Penguin, just save this podcast or save this segment for later, and then come back once you have seen episode 1 of Penguin. This is your full spoiler warning. Let's get into it. So we start out here. It's not necessarily a previous on, but it kind of serves as a previously on as we get back into the Batman universe. And right away, I love being back. It's just so stylized and so different than anything else we've been getting in the superhero space, and it makes me really miss this world. That first Matt Reeves' Batman film, while it may not necessarily be my all-time favorite Batman movie, I'm still a big believer in Batman Begins. I love The Dark Knight as well. But I just do love the Batman and love a lot of things that Robert Pattinson was able to bring to that role. And so just being back in this universe, we also hear the Batman theme, which is one of my favorite new superhero themes kick in. It's a very simple theme. It almost feels like the Imperial March in a slow piano kind of way. It's awesome though. It's really, really awesome. And I think that that's great. One of the other things I noticed in this little prologue as well is the political undertones, which I think is really great. Now, not to get too into politics necessarily, but I just want to talk about the things that they were touching upon that I think are really cool, is that, look, you have this scenario in which the city is flooding. And so then what happens? Well, they talk about it in this news broadcast that there's going to be chaos in the city, right? There, the city, which I think was already in a state of unrest when we found it in the Batman, is now really severely in a state of unrest. And then obviously the crime families with the death of Carmine Falcone, which I guess it's Falcone. Everyone is saying Falcone. I've always said Carmine Falcone, which I think Nolan's Batman universe said Falcone. I could be totally wrong, but we're going to use what they said, It's not Namor, it's Namor in the MCU, so we're going to use whatever they say. So I'm going to say the Falcones. Carmine Falcone is dead, and the other really awesome thing that I thought they highlighted was showing the wealth disparity, the wealth gap, the inequality there, where you have the rich people being protected from the city, and that includes your Bruce Waynes of the world, I'm sure, but also, as we see later, the Falcones, people who are really living in these mansions and super rich, and it's in the first 5 minutes, I'm so on board because there's so much going on that makes this feel like a three-dimensional, grounded, gritty crime drama that I love that about the opening of this show. So then we get reintroduced to Oz Cobb, and I love the walk. Look, there's not a lot in this show that's sort of meant to be corny or not corny, but just kind of a sly hint and a nod to things. But this walk very clearly is their attempt to be like, this is about as far into the comic booky as we're going to go with Oswald Cobblepot. And I think it's really fun. I think it's a really nice nod to the character as the Penguin here. So then, we have this conversation with Penguin and Alberto Falcone. And right away, I mean, I don't know if you guys caught this as well, but right away, my spider sense was tingling to borrow a phrase from another universe. I immediately knew, well, I think a couple things here, right? From the trailers, we knew that Sophia Falcone was going to be the biggest presence in the show from the Falcone family. And so I kind of thought, okay, you're introducing Alberto Falcone. I'm 90% sure that he's going to kill him. And sure enough, he kills him. But I think the conversation that they have is super interesting because, in hindsight now, having seen this hour-long episode, which, by the way, how great is it to have hour-long episodes that are just this awesome? Which I really enjoyed Agatha, the first 2 episodes, but if they were able to pace it out well, imagine what it would be like to have hour-long MCU episodes. Anyways, I digress. But, the conversation that they're having, I think is really interesting because in hindsight, it sets up everything about the show in the first 10 minutes. And you don't realize it at the time because you're just trying to soak it all in. The fact that, oh my gosh, he just killed one of the Falcones, what's going to happen? And, sometimes shows open and they just kind of open with, they have slower burns, let's say. Like, not to go back to the MCU all the time, but, in WandaVision, right? The first couple episodes, there's slower burns, right? What happens in the first scene of WandaVision, it's not meant to be, the grand spark that sparks the entire show. But this is, right? He kills Alberto Falcone, and they have this conversation where it seems like a big drug drop is going to be happening that, the Penguin is now targeting to become the kingpin of Gotham City. So that's really interesting as well. And yeah, I mean, one of the other things that I really like here is that you get to see a bit more of Oz's personality and the fact that, look, I mean, Alberto is just making fun of Oz and really calling him a good soldier, which he really hates. And you get to see how much, disdain Penguin has for that kind of thing. I think that's a big part of his personality that we're going to see more of moving forward, which I think is a really, really good thing here. So yeah, anyways, I mentioned again in my notes here, I saw the death coming because, it's Sophia Falcone, and Oz kind of has this moment where he's like, uh-oh, like, what have I done? But I love that he's able to kind of pivot really quickly and move on from there. So then we have, Penguin, coming out of the little lounge here with the body, and he scares off a bunch of kids who are trying to attack his car. Now, little did I know at the time, in the first 15 minutes of this episode, that this is also going to be really influential. That's one of the things I love about this opening, is that nothing feels wasted, right? The opening little prologue previously on kind of thing is setting up all the information that we need to know. And then we have all this information about him killing Alberto Falcone, and then him recruiting Victor Aguilar as well, which is a pivotal part, it seems like, of this show as well, which I think is really cool. Because I think what it shows here is that Oz wants to be loved and respected. He told this story about a gangster that he knew as a child, who he admired so much, who he thought, was really respected. And that's really who he wants to be, because he's been so looked down upon. He's what I think is so interesting about this character so far is that he is basically a child. I mean, I think it's a point that the show makes to bring in his mother, because it shows that he is pretty much a child here. And yet at the same time, he's a deranged person all at once. He's crazy, he'll and that's part of his upbringing as well. It's kind of the whole nature and nurture kind of thing. But, I'm really interested now to see what this kid Victor is going to bring out of him, and what their dynamic is going to be. Because that whole conversation they have in the car as they're driving off is so tense, and you can tell that Oz has this wicked in the sense of not necessarily evil, but just sort of sharp personality, and yet this also childish glee and this childish temper as well. And yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating to watch. That conversation in the car, before Victor really commits to all this, is just it's really one of the more tense scenes that I've seen in a long time. And Colin Farrell, again, kudos to him, is terrifying in the sense that he disappears into the role. He just completely disappears. You have that conversation between Oz and Victor in that parking lot where they're getting rid of the body, and it's great. It's so good because you can see that delicate balance between the two characters, and I think that is really awesome. So anyways, we get to meet now Sophia Falcone, as Oz is in some big trouble now, because Sophia immediately knows that I think she obviously knows that Oz is the one who killed her brother, although he gives her kind of a red herring at the end of the episode. And I have to say, Sophia Falcone got maybe about 15 minutes of screen time in this episode, and I am ready to say it, guys. I'm ready to say it. Sophia Falcone may be the single scariest villain in comic book movies and shows ever that I've seen personally. I think there's something different about having a character who is this cold and this calculating and this scary and also chaotic at the same time. But she knows exactly what she wants. It's just different than somebody like Heath Ledger's Joker, for example, who is scary. He's very scary, but he's scary in a sort of animalistic, chaotic way. Sophia Falcone is almost a predator, and I don't mean that in the legalistic sense. I just mean like an animal. Like she is going after what she wants, and she knows. She has her eyes on you. She doesn't really blink sometimes. It's crazy. Kudos. I think Kristen Milioti or something like that. I apologize if I butchered the name, but she is just incredible in this first episode. I just could not believe it. She's so dangerous, and you see how Oz is playing such a dangerous game, lying to Sophia Falcone. And I think it's going to be this twisted web of twists and turns and zigs and zags, and it's incredibly tense, these scenes that they're in, because we're seeing the bigger picture of what Oz is doing, but it's hard for it's hard for us not to kind of root for him to get out of it, but then also it's just like bad people and then worse people, right? And that's what's really incredible about the show as well. So anyways, one of the things I talked about in last week's podcast episode, one of the things I wanted to see is a different side of Oz, and we definitely do get that here. We get that because we see him with his mom. Now, it's interesting because he seems like he cares about his mom, but then the show, as it does so deftly, spins it back on its head and shows that it's kind of an abusive relationship, and you see where his manic side kind of comes from, because his mom is just intense, and it's crazy. And that scene with his mom, I'm sure we'll see more of her as the season goes on, but really, really intense relationship, and we'll see how that plays into who he became. And then we're getting more of the dynamic between Victor and Oz, and I think that is working really well as well. I think it's a really unexpected thing that we got to see something like that, but I think it's going to bring out a lot from Oz as a character. Then he goes to the prison to meet Sal Maroni, who is played by the wonderful Clancy Brown. Really great scene, because you can tell that Oz, I don't know, on the one hand, it's almost like he's bluffing his way into things, but then on the other hand, he puts the ring on the table, and it's like, yeah, no, he had that whole thing figured out at the very end, because then we have this interesting, kind of intense car chase that goes on there, and Sophia captures him and is trying to get a confession out of him. Really, really uncomfortable scene, but in all the right ways, quote unquote the right ways, the ways in which the directors and the writers intended it, for sure. And then the body of Alberto Falcone is found, and it looks like the whole plan, because I was a little confused. I was like, how does Oz just get out of this at the end of the episode? But then you realize that he is framing Maroni, and now we're basically starting a gang war. And it's just, look, this is not necessarily, as we wrap up my thoughts on this episode, this is not necessarily my quote-unquote kind of show. I mean, just as a reference, my 3 favorite shows of all time right now are Friends, number 1, number 2, The West Wing, and number 3, Stranger Things. So this is not necessarily my quote-unquote kind of show. I haven't seen The Sopranos, I haven't seen, I haven't really been a big big fan, I guess, of gangster shows and gangster movies, but I have to say that this show, while it's not going to be the one that warms my heart and does, but the actors, the performances are intense. The story is riveting. I'm a sucker for political intrigue in shows, and yeah, I mean, gang warfare in a certain sense is kind of like politics, right? It's really interesting in that way. And so all the subterfuge and all these different things that are going on. I'm just such a big fan of shows that are complex and treat their characters as really complicated people. And look, I don't know. I mean, like I said last week, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to relate to Oz more than just, oh, he's a bad guy, and that's who he is. And I think we're getting that. I think we're getting a true crime kind of feel. Not true crime, but, truly a crime kind of feel. And I am blown away. I'm blown away by this first episode. I cannot wait for the next one. I can't wait to see where we go from here. And I love getting to spend an hour every week in this Batman universe. I love it. I love that we're getting to do that. And I think that that's awesome. So let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this first episode of The Penguin. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that'll do it for Access Blockbusters Pod episode number 41. Thank you guys so much for joining us on today's episode. And it's been a joy to be able to talk about all these things. Like I said, for a couple more weeks, we're going to have 3 episodes of television coming out pretty much every single week, which is awesome. And then it's going to be Agatha and Penguin for a little bit. So it's a fun time, guys. It's really a fun time. I'm going to be seeing some movies in the coming weeks as well. We're going to be talking about Joker Folie à Deux, which is coming out in a couple weeks, and then I'm hoping to see movies like Transformers 1, Wild Robot. Who knows if we'll do reviews about that? Probably. I'll try to do that in the coming weeks as well. Maybe even Saturday Night, which is a movie that's coming out in a few weeks. But yeah, I mean, stay tuned on the channel. It's going to be an exciting time. But until then, guys, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Give this video a like if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Rate it on Spotify, and I will see you guys in the next one.